Thanks, Christy. With the death of Fidel Castro and the election of Donald Trump, the thaw in the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba, some believe could be in jeopardy. The signs could be found in the very different reactions to Castro's death from President Obama and President-elect Trump. In his statement, President Obama neither criticized nor praised him, meaning Castro, emphasizing that, quote, the Cuban people must know that they have a friend and partner in the United States of America, unquote. While Trump called Castro a brutal dictator and posted on Twitter, quote, Fidel Castro is dead. There was an exclamation point with that. I want to bring in now Helen Aguirre-Ferre. She is the director of Hispanic communications for the RNC and a Trump supporter. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm wondering,
Martin,
Ms. Ferre,
thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm wondering, Mr. Trump has threatened, at least prior to the election, to undo the work done by President Obama to bring the U.S. and Cuba closer together. What kind of changes in this relationship could you foresee in a Trump administration?
Well, there's no question that President-elect Trump sees and understands how complex the relationship is between the United States and Cuba. But at the same time, he also realizes that the Obama administration did not concede or get any concessions from the Cuban government when it opened diplomatic relations with Cuba. And there are 3 points President-elect Trump is very clear on. That, number one, political prisoners must be released from Cuba. Number 2, American fugitives need to be returned to the United States for justice. And number 3, that we do need to have political and religious freedom for all Cubans on the island of Cuba. And these are 3 basic points that I think everybody would agree with are normal in a free and open and democratic society. And that is exactly what President-elect Trump wants for the people of Cuba, for them to be sovereign and for them to be able to have political and free elections on the island.
And those are very valid points. I'm wondering if the death of Fidel Castro, we all know, of course, Raul Castro, his brother, is in power. Do you think that this poses an opportunity for Mr. Trump to sort of go back, revisit what he said before, and now, as president-elect, take on this new challenge?
Well, there's no question about it that when we look at this point in time, and President-elect Trump in his statement acknowledges that while Fidel Castro has died, and he was a brutal dictator for 57 years, certainly the longest dictatorship in the Western Hemisphere, that nothing has changed as far as what goes on in the island of Cuba politically, because Raul Castro is also a totalitarian dictator. However, it does present a new opportunity, perhaps, and the dawn of a new day where perhaps there is an opportunity to move forward, to help the island and the people of Cuba be able to move forward, to be able to live in the 21st century in a country where human rights are respected for all.
I'm wondering, there is now a sense that a lot of economic investment may come from the United States to Cuba, not just in tourism, but also we've looked at the industries of agriculture, say. And with those companies, American companies, making these kind of investments, making these kind of plans, if Mr. Trump were to suddenly pull back on this relationship, it would have a pretty negative impact on many American firms and many American outlooks towards Cuba.
Is part of the complexity, Martin, of what's going on with United States' relationship with Cuba, which President-elect Trump has acknowledged and is going to be looking at very closely. But there also is something to be said about supporting human rights within 90 miles of U.S. shores, and all that implies. It's not like we're doing business with the Cuban people. The United States is doing business with the Cuban military regime that has supported firing squads, and quite frankly, in the last few years that we've had diplomatic relations, has increased repression on the island, has increased the number of political detainees, even attacks women going to church, such as the Ladies in White, closing down more churches than ever before. So you see the repression increasing while the military gets richer. So what we need to do is provide a platform where we can have negotiations, better deal making, as President-elect Trump has been very clear on, where the Cuban government doesn't just receive all the benefits from the United States, but that the Cuban people also receive something, and that includes political religious freedoms, once again, the release of all political freedoms, political prisoners, and at the same time, American fugitives be brought to justice in the United States.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we have to leverage democracy so that we could be, or bring it, for the benefit of the Cuban people. But my worry is that perhaps the Trump administration could backtrack on what's already been done as far as opening an avenue, opening a means of negotiation, as you put it.
But Martin, look at what's been done. We're enriching the Cuban military, and it's not like it doesn't have a price on democracy in the rest of the hemisphere. You see the Cuban government that is totally supporting repression in Venezuela. You see that also occurring in other countries where the constitutions have been politically manipulated to keep totalitarian regimes and dictatorships in power, such as the case of Bolivia, such as the case of Nicaragua. So you see, it's not just isolated. What we're seeing in Cuba isn't isolated just to Cuba, but it's something that festers and is infesting the Western Hemisphere. And we should be supportive of our neighbors. We should be good neighbors, and we should be helping the people of Cuba, which is not to say that we can't be helping American businesses and American agriculture, but there has to be a line that's crossed, and American values have to be respected at home and abroad as well.
Right, and it does send a broader message, not just to Cuba, but to Central and South America as well. Helen Aguirre-Ferre, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for the invitation.